What's up, y'all? This is Mike Manzer with another Manzer Faust Productions video, and I am back with another episode of Stop, Watch, and Listen. I was gonna do this last week, but I ended up kind of getting distracted with other things. I had two videos last week that are doing amazing, so no complaints. The Sakevi tribute is doing insane numbers, and I am so blown away and thankful for all the feedback, all of the praise that video is getting. I love it. And the other video I did, which was a contest related video for 2,000 subscribers from Analog Archive, great channel. Love for you to still go out there and support him. Um, like that's been doing pretty well as well, and very cool because that's probably the longest video I've done so far. And there's a lot of great information, a lot of great, like, kind of records that I talk about. Not a lot of comments on that one yet, but we'll see what happens. Like I said, go and support Analog Archives channel. He's doing amazing fucking stuff. But yeah, today I'm back doing another one of these Stop, Watch, and Listen. A couple of weeks ago, I did a big haul of records, throughout the week. Uh, Ended up getting some stuff at Static Era. Went to a place I haven't been in a long time called Elm City Sounds. A really cool guy running that place. He's got a lot of great experience in that kind of record dealing. He's always been at the conventions. This motherfucker knows his shit. So I loved going in there. It's been a while. And I also went to my tried and true place, Archive, in Bridgeport, and got some really great older records there, stuff I've always had in mind, and yeah, very cool. So I'm gonna get into those after I talk about the two releases from Vinegar Syndrome from last month that I have gotten the chance to dig into. I have not been able to dive into the Cardona collection yet. Like I said, I'm going to probably do all of those at once. All seven, because I haven't done the volume one yet either. Uh, and expect a giant video on those whenever I get finished. And I am also going to work on the four films in the Apocalypse Trilogy. I forget how you say it, but those films that were released by Vinegar Syndrome Labs. Really excited to dive into those and kind of learn more about that. This kind of Polish dystopian sci-fi kind of visions. Very cool. Very excited about that. So that will be a video in the future as well. Kind of try and start a new kind of series, as if I don't have enough already, but a new kind of series talking about box sets, and that would be very cool because there's a lot of older box sets, even like DVD based box sets, that kind of formed my love of film and my interest in a lot of films that I'd love to dive into and kind of look back at. So, hell yeah, look for that in the future. So for now, we're gonna dive into the two the titles from last month that I have watched. And yeah, so here we go. First up, Killer Condom 4K remaster. This has not been widely available on Blu-ray. I believe there was an old Trauma release, but I do not have that one. Ridiculous artwork. I love this artwork. And then you got the main cover on the inside. The 4K on this looks amazing. I watched it on my projector. It looks fantastic. And this is a fun film. The way it's shot is very, like that early 90s. This is from 96, but it feels like it was filmed around 94 or 95. It's got that kind of vibe to it. Very over the top. What you go to Trauma for is definitely all of it's in this movie. The ridiculous dialogue, the over the top characters, the kind of like satirical and like social commentary aspects that you would get from a lot of their films even later on. Um, these kind of things working under the surface of this very wacky kind of creature feature. Very interesting idea behind this. Basically, these cops in New York are on the case, trying to find out like what is going on. Like all, as the reports are coming in, it seems like there's these sex workers who are biting off people's genitalia, um, and they keep hearing these rumblings about, oh, it was this like condom that like bit it off, and all this kind of crazy circumstances around it. Really, you know, spearheaded by this college. I believe she's a college student, and her professor brings her to this particular hotel where all of this shit is going down in this particular room. The hotel manager seems to not know anything about it, and he just kind of takes like an apathetic stance towards these sex workers, as long as he gets his money kind of mentality. And the college professor tries to seduce her, and she is against it, and so it's believed that she, reacted in self-defense. Um, all these like crazy stories start coming out of that, though, and um, the main um, cop on it is, becomes obsessed with it. There's all this kind of stereotypical kind of cop stuff about you're off the case, you can't, you have way too much of like a weird kind of analysis of this, and you're believing the victims too much, and all that kind of stuff, or the suspects, you're putting way too much uh, belief in them. It's also like, you know, shown that he is kind of, you know, it's not really a closeted kind of gay character. He's very like kind of apathetic towards it. Like, yeah, I do what I do. It's like he's not very like he says very much he's not into like a sexual thrill. It's more just like it's an interesting kind of character study. He's that stereotype like stone faced jaded cop kind of character. There's some interesting kind of representations of like trans identity in this. Like, yeah, it does feel a little bit cringy if you're looking at it from a modern day aspect. But again, this is like 96. Again, I feel like it was filmed in 94, 95. And the way that they deal with trans identity, uh, at least compared to other pieces of work, especially comedic and like, independent budget kind of films, the way they would deal with it is very progressive for the time, and it's very interesting that the kind of personality that they give this trans character, the kind of it's it's kind of an interesting kind of play on it. And this movie is very progressive in the way that it treats like LGBTQ characters, everything like that. That wasn't really thought of at the time. Everything you would usually see is they were like, secretly a serial killer, or they would be used as like this kind of comic relief. Sometimes like all of the above. Like it just was not very positive. It's kind of portrayal. And while this, in that modern day kind of terminology, you might not see it as positive, like you go back in time and look at that time in the 90s, like this is like as progressive as it could get. And it's got a very European feel to the whole thing. Like the way it's shot feels very that independent, like Euro kind of thing. You do also pick up on a lot of influence from stuff that was happening in queer cinema, more on like an even more underground level. Stuff like Gus Van Sant definitely comes to mind. Stuff like my own private Idaho, and oh god, what was the other one? Like a lot of the I can't remember his name, but he did like the Doom Generation and that kind of stuff. This sort of thing that has like a very like that 90s industrial kind of dance soundtrack kind of trope, but also mixed with very like gay centric themes throughout, and just plays it very straight ahead, and not serious, but it's very honest. And it's interesting what this movie has to say within all of that about like sex work and like the kind of like disrespect that sex workers get in their fields. There's a lot going on in this film. You could tell that the people writing it really had something to say, and really does fit into that trauma kind of camp, but at the same time definitely does transcend it very much so, because this movie was definitely doing stuff that even trauma films were not touching at the time. And it's interesting because it was made in Europe. I believe it's a Belgian production. Everybody's speaking German, and it's kind of funny because they're speaking German, but it's supposed to take place in New York City. It's just this kind of weird thing where everyone in this universe, everyone in New York speaks fluent German. It's kind of funny to me if you look at it in that way. But yeah, just interesting film. A lot of great people working behind it. I said in a previous video talking about it, has the guy who worked on Necromantic, worked on a lot of like effects for the film. He was kind of an effects coordinator for the film, and the design of the killer condom is no other than H.R. Geiger, who is someone I definitely want to discuss in a video once I get into another series I've been hinting at about artists. This heavy video I did before talks about how I want to get into more of his artwork he would do for other bands, and his kind of photography work and collage work, and his kind of influence through that. Definitely H.R. Geiger, through his like set design, the influence he had on things like Alien and Hodorowski's unmade Dune project, the his album artwork, everything like that. And this definitely falls into that because the creature effects on this killer condom are extremely well done and extremely unsettling. The teeth that it gives it, the kind of like later on when you find out it's kind of this creature membrane running through the thing, like it's got its own kind of like mind and all these other like synapse and everything like that. It's just very, very kind of gross, but also very interesting and very inspiring, when you look at like what went into it, like what went into designing this creature is very cool. So yeah, Killer Condom, man. Like if you have not picked this up yet, I definitely recommend it. It's a great time. And if you're into trauma and everything like that, this is definitely top tier trauma stuff. Even outdoes some of those like, go-tos that people will talk about. So yeah, definitely pick this up. And next up, really great releases this month because I had a lot of fun with this. I kind of went into it not expecting a lot. This is Amazon Jail 1 and 2. You got that artwork on this as well. So this was very cool. These are films from Brazil during the, I believe, so 82 and 87. So these are two films. One of them wasn't made as a, Amazon Jail 2. It has a different title. Slave Prisoners of the Amazon, I think it's called. But like, it's fascinating because these are two different like directors, totally different visions. So the first one is definitely this gritty. It's got its humor in it, but it's definitely not like a slapstick humor. It's more of a satirical kind of like dark humor. you got it's basically this woman in prison film mixed with like that Amazon kind of like, jungle kind of film stuff you would get with like, the cannibal films coming out of Italy in the late 70s. Um, and a few like, you get that zombie, a lot of the, those like kind of, Fulci's Zombie 2 era kind of Amazonian, adventure, but like, horror films. So you get those two kind of elements mixed together in this very well. Like I said, the dark humor, the kind of over the top exploitation. The subject matter is very intense. There's it's basically this like kind of prison of women living in this like hut, and they're exploited for sex. There's like all the different kind of, I believe they're like villagers or residents of the surrounding areas who come to the to this hut and basically have sex with the inmates through the little like slots in the hut. Use your imagination. It's kind of weird because a lot of the characters in this are pretty much just naked the entire time, or nobody is like fully clothed for like more than 5 seconds in this film. It's pretty insane. Just like the amount of it, it's very that like South American exploitation kind of vibe, where it's just like, yeah, let's just, everything's on the table as far as like exploitation's concerned. They're all being the operation is being run by Edgar, who's this like fat, perverted, kind of creepy drunk, and Helena, who's a lesbian. It's very much, you don't see it, but it is very, actually you do. She has a few of the prisoners working as her like kind of sex slaves at the same time, but she is also like, there's a few scenes in here that are very intense and very uncomfortable where she is assaulted by Edgar. There's a few scenes where you see Edgar also assaulting a few of the prisoners as well. There's this kind of discussion on who is actually like the evil one, because they're both using these people to their ends. One of the people that's kind of affiliated with the operation is secretly trying to work together with one of the female prisoners, who's kind of the head of the whole thing. This kind of rebellion, and he's romantically involved with her, and they're both trying to plan an escape. And it does have a bit of like hijinks at the end of it. Them trying to outrun all of these like hunters hired by Edgar. Tons of explosions and stuff like that, but it's a very straightforward, very exploitive kind of film, very intense. I feel like they play off these kind of dark themes very well, with a bit of dark humor in there as well, which helps. The tone is all over the place, but it does really kind of focus, and that's great when you compare it to the second one, which I did enjoy, but it's very ridiculous. Like the second one definitely goes in more of a slapstick, almost like, compared to the first one, almost like PG kind of direction, because there's not a ton of nudity. I don't really remember any from the second one. It's more these two guys are hired by this mafia boss, to kind of bring all these like imprisoned slave women, white slave women, to this Japanese kind of I guess Yakuza mob boss kind of character. They have this deal going, and so he hires these two kind of fumbling One of them's like the stereotypical fat guy who's got his own like kind of motives behind it, and then the other guy who's more like the head of it. He's trying to drag this pudgy guy around, and they don't really get along. They're going back and forth like arguing with each other, but it's very slapstick. It's very goofy. Both of these movies have terrible dubbing, which I adore. It's got that typical of the times. It never matches up. Like, the voices coming out of these characters make absolutely no sense. You could tell like that it's dubbed. It has that same feel of like what I love from like classic Godzilla films and a lot of international, a lot of those like kind of Italian crime films sometimes have really bad dubbing. You could imagine Bob from House by the Cemetery showing up in this kind of randomly. But yeah, it's still fun though. It's still enjoyable. You still have fun watching. The in betweens. The head to head kind of thing between the Yakuza boss and the Italian mob boss. Like, they're both like, everyone in this movie is pretty much inept, pretty much a buffoon, and but it's entertaining for what it is. Like I said, that both of these films are tonally opposite of one another, but I do think it works. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of approach to both of these, and yeah, so trigger warning for what I've talked about in these, but if you're into like women in prison, exploitation kind of stuff, that kind of comes with the territory, and it's more so in the first one. The second one's just your straight ahead kind of farce. So yeah, but Amazon Jail 1 and 2, great films. Very cool to see this come out when we recently had the announcement of the Coffin Joe box set from Arrow. So a lot of Brazilian stuff getting that attention, because in the past, it's been hard to get a hold of a lot of it. So very cool. So yeah, now I'm gonna head into the records that I picked up a couple of weeks ago. First up, I'm gonna talk about what I was able to grab from Elm City Sounds. And yeah, I was just like out walking on one of my long walks that I am known to do, and I ended up in Westville, and I went by there and he was closed. I guess he had something going on earlier in the day. Came back around at like around 3 or 4, and he was open, and got to go in there. Hadn't been in there in a long time. Got to catch up with the owner and a couple of the other people who were there. And yeah, grabbed a few classics. One of them, I didn't pull because it's, I'm saving it for a later video. But yeah, so first up, we got King Crimson, Starless, and Bible Black. This is the second album in the kind of trilogy that started with Lark's Tongue and Aspic and Red. Those two albums bookend this record. And, those are two of my favorite King Crimson albums. Lark's Tongue and Aspic's probably my favorite. I always consider, my favorite King Crimson album to be Court of the Crimson King, just because I have the most history for it, with it. It's the most iconic for me. I know the songs as the best off of that album. Like, it just has the most history with me. But really, Lark's Tongue and Aspic, as far as like the one that really grew on me and the one I go back to the most of recent years, and even Red, like both of those albums are very much kind of inseparable. And this falls in there as well. It's sandwiched in the middle. It's a little bit of a weirder kind of vibe. So this trilogy is Bill Bruford, who was part of Yes, and David Cross on violin and viola, and John Wetton on bass and vocal. The vocals on these albums are amazing. Probably some of the best vocal work. And, that's going up against Greg Lake on those early King Crimson records, and that's not much to fuck with, because that's a lot to fuck with. I mean, because like you have like songs like Epitaph, which is one of my favorite compositions of all time. Like that's such a beautifully devastating, like epic song that just means so much to me. And like on Red, you have Starless, which is another one that kind of goes head to head with Epitaph. Just an amazingly expansive, devastating melody. You have the mellotron played by Robert Fripp on these albums, as he always had, and it's just the kind of melodies he gets out of this mellotron are just so like haunting and transporting. I talk about it a lot on here, especially in the last video I did about albums that can transport you to another place and like transcend like their kind of earthly qualities. And it's very much on this album. Great Deceiver has that like kind of heavy, all their albums always start with that extremely heavy crunchy song, much like on in Court of the Crimson King you got 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is just this like free jazz prog slammer, very metallic. Even though you would never really consider King Crimson a metal band by any stretch, it definitely would work in with like anybody's playlist of early metal. It's heavier than anything. And Great Deceiver kind of works the same way. Very heavy guitar work. Very much reminds you of off the next album. You got that track, another Red Nightmare, one more Red Nightmare. Just it's pummeling, and the guitar work on these, especially the drum work from Bill Bruford, is just all over the place. He's definitely got his own kind of individual style of playing. And I've heard interviews where when you were joining King Crimson at this point, you had to completely come up with a new style of playing, and the only time you could use that style of playing is in King Crimson. And throughout these three albums, you hear how these kind of like how they would play off of each other and kind of evolve their sounds within, like this kind of distorted, like dang, 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 the very kind of proto-industrial sound that Fripp was getting out of his guitar, like just like this jagged, very like machinery style delivery from that. You got like Wynton's voice, which like with all this chaos and everything like that, still hits these amazing highs. And his bass playing, to know that he's playing bass and vocalizing on a lot of these tracks, it's just fucking mind blowing. Like the complexity of these songs, like the time signature changes just on it, it's just like nothing, and they're all together and tight as hell. It's insane to hear David Cross on the keyboards, just laying down that kind of main groove, and playing off of Bill Bruford, who's just going all over the place. There's so many different kind of percussive instruments in use. Sort of like the beginning of Lark's Tongue and Aspic, when you hear all the different chimes and wood blocks and all these different kind of atmospheric instrumentations. Like it's just very, very like just awe-inspiring, and just it goes up and down, up and down. There's certain tracks on here, Trio and The Mincer, which just sound fucking gorgeous but evil and like kind of menacing all at the same time. Side 2, you got the two epics, Starless and Bible Black and Fracture. And Starless and Bible Black, is interesting because it's more of a kind of it doesn't really sound like a precursor to Starless on the next record, but it could work. You could meld them two together. It's a lot more of a chaotic, heavy, more in place with like Great Deceiver and Lark's Tongue, parts whatever on Lark's Tongue and Aspect. Um, so yeah, but there's also like throughout all these moments of like pure blissful like orchestration through these instruments and through the playing. It's just very interesting, all the different tonal shifts and um, you know tempo changes they'll go through, just like I said, like nothing, like it's just natural for them, and it's very cool. And these albums all fit together extremely well. So yeah, if you've gotten into that early King Crimson stuff and you just want to go that next step ahead, like these arts just some of the best albums, probably the best trilogy of like 70s rock albums ever. Just unfucking beatable. So yeah, happy to have this. I'm kind of working on trying to finish up my King Crimson collection. I still got like 6 albums left. There's a lot. It goes pretty deep. And there's some eras I don't have much from. The Discipline era, I have Discipline, but I don't have the next two. And I don't have any of the Thrak, Construction of Light era stuff either. And I got one or two from the original kind of run of albums that I need to pick up. But yeah, just one of my favorite bands. Such an interesting career. Fripp, his other projects like Fripp and Eno, and some of the stuff he would do, as a session musician on like Heroes by Bowie. Just like amazing career that guy has had, and truly some of the best live performances I have ever seen are King Crimson. So yeah, happy to have this finally. It's definitely like an album I should have got years ago, but for whatever reason, I would always pass on it. So, like I said, happy to get that. And, switching vibes into, what you're used to from this channel. This is another, like, legendary album. One, it's, like, surprising I never picked it up before. Saw this sitting on the table, and I'm like, that can't be an original. And it's not, but, for the price, you can't go wrong. It's just, this needed to come home with me. And yeah, this is Metallica, Kill 'Em All, the debut 1983 album from Metallica. And I don't really have to say much about this. Y'all know this fucking record. Definitely more of like that punk inspired, like British, new wave of British heavy metal kind of riffing and like song structure and everything like that. The delivery is like probably like James Hetfield on vocals. Like best delivery is either on this or Ride the Lightning, which is my personal favorite Metallica record. And it's cool to look back at the first 4 records, and they all have their kind of own identity to them. Cliff Burton, man, this record, out of all of them, this is really like his spotlight record for me, especially with the track Anesthesia Pulling Teeth. It's like an instrumental that's very focused on his bass playing, and just the kind of crazy effects and sounds he would get out of his bass playing. I talk a lot about my favorite bass players, Lemmy, John Entwistle, people like John Paul Jones, Jaco Pastorius from The Weather Report, all these different types of people. And Cliff Burton definitely falls into that category. They definitely lost like an integral part of their sound when he died, and it's still a tragedy. And really, to me, I don't really think Metallica ever recovered from that. Just kind of continuously, just kind of disappoint me. Yeah, I have no interest in listening to that newest album. I don't want an hour and a half of just what I've gotten from Metallica the last 30 years. It just does nothing for me. But this is always great. You can't deny how iconic and kind of like how this changed a lot of things as far as like American metal is going. You know, this was going up against, you know, a lot of that glam stuff in the 80s that was just coming out. So, you know, like, this is definitely not a glam record. You could tell by that picture, you know, it's just like, those are not glam people, you know, like, if anything, like when Sebastian Bach from Skid Row told that joke years ago. It's like, you look at the back picture and they all look ugly. This is not a glam metal band. He's dead on right. Like, this is definitely like the, you know, anti-glam record for sure. Like, this thing, you cannot deny, like, this starts mosh pits to this day, man. This is like such great grooves, like the Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Whiplash. You know, you got Phantom Lord, which is a song not a lot of people talk about, which just has this great, like, kind of like just the riff to it definitely pulls like this kind of like Diamond Head sort of aesthetic to it, and even like Angel Witch. This is this classic kind of and even like debut Iron Maiden. You know, they were all big fans of really obscure records from the new wave of British heavy metal and all this kind of stuff, and they were all listening to bands like Merciful Fate and Venom, you know, Motorhead, obviously, and like just the kind of you know, melodies on this, you know, that kind of breakdown halfway through Four Horsemen, where it kind of goes like din, 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 din. Like, that shit's so fucking cool to me. Like, that was so revolutionary at the time, and that's why I love this record, because it's that embryonic stage of this sound that we would later know as thrash metal. That's just so great. Like I said, my favorite is definitely the next album, Ride the Lightning, but man, it's hard to compete with these first three. And I do like Injustice for All. It's just, you know, I got my obvious problems that everybody's said with that album, but yeah, thrilled to have that. I also made a trip to Static Era, and they had this record the first time I went, when I showed the trip I made when I showed off a couple of weeks ago my Accept and a couple of other records I got that day. I believe Duran Duran's Seven and the Ragged Tiger was the same day. Had to go back and get this Riot, Fire Down Under. I can't remember which number Riot on this. I believe it's the third. Yeah, it's the third. Really, really, this is an iconic record. Swords and Tequila, Fire Down Under, and Outlaw on the first side. You know, the second side kind of gets a little samey, is not as well remembered as the first side, but yeah, Swords and Tequila just is such an iconic, like, great, powerful, like, song. More mid-pace than like what I'm more used to later on with stuff like Thundersteel. But yeah, really great album. You got the ridiculous artwork with the Mighty Tior on the front there. I always found that funny, that their mascot's just this like big, burly, strong guy, but for some reason they put a goddamn seal head on him. It's just very ridiculous, but it works somehow. Like, it's one of those iconic metal mascots, even though it's nothing like Vic Rattlehead or Not Guy or whatever, you know, random, yeah, Eddie. You know, it's got its own kind of you know, humor. You know, like, this is definitely a band that spearheaded, you know, what would be known as like American power metal. You know, that style of playing, along with stuff like Faint's Warning. So yeah, really, really solid record. Happy to get this. Trying to get more Riot material in my collection. And now we're on to the big haul. that I did, and that is from the archive. One of these I already showed off in my last video, was Unquestionable Presence by Atheist. So I'm not going to show that one again. I pretty much said everything I want to say about it in that video, so if you have not seen that yet, go check that out to hear me talk about the second Atheist record. Another band I've been trying to fill the holes in my collection. Still got a ways to go, but this finishes up the 70s output, which is probably my favorite era of this band, which is hard to say because a lot of their 80s material is some of the best stuff to come out in that era, but there's no doubting how great these like early 70s records are. Well, the first one I don't have. Eventually I'll be able to pick that up, but yeah. Hellbent for Leather, Judas Priest, and this is definitely a transition record, like with those earlier records, Sad Wings of Destiny, Sin After Sin, Stained Class, which are definitely some of their greatest albums. This does fit in with those, but this is a lot more what you would think of with Judas Priest, the kind of driving biker, anthemic metal style you would get on definitely British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. Just this is kind of the transition album into that kind of sound. You have more of this kind of sort of prog, psychedelic kind of style that you would get from those earlier albums, especially on and this is the beginning of the leather period. Halford would come out on fucking motorcycle, rocking like the leather jacket with studs, and everything's very inspired by those kinky sex shops that Halford would regular, which I love. That I love the leather look. It's so dominating and kind of an endearing symbol of heavy metal. It's the heaviest look you can get at that time. And yeah, dude, it's just this band delivering the goods. That first track, it's a manifesto for what this band was going to do on this album and following albums. This thing is full of fucking anthems. Rock Forever, his vocals on that chorus are just so soaring. Hellbent for Leather is obviously one of their most well-known songs. Take on the World is this great kind of stomping fist in the air anthemic song. Killing Machine, Running Wild, just this whole thing is stacked, and it might not be on the level of a Stained Class or Sad Wings of Destiny, but man, all of those 70s albums they were coming out with, aside from Rock-a-Rolla, just blow it out of the park, man. Judas Priest was definitely doing some of the best early heavy metal you can find. Just so fucking great. Next up, might get in trouble for this album cover, but it's kind of unavoidable. And this, I have their first album, and this is the second album, so I'm kind of unintentionally going in order. But yeah, so hold your stomachs. Hope you're not eating. This is Typo Negatives, The Origin of the Feces, aka Not Live at Brighton Beach. And I kind of love this record for being the anti kind of live album. Basically, they rented out a studio and tried to make this kind of fake live album, and they definitely proceeded. You could really mistake this as an actual live album. The members of the band are doing the whole you suck, and then the band is playing off themselves, yelling at them. This is that insane Brooklyn accent that you know, Peter Steele would become known for. You know, the just so many goofy things on this record. The bomb threat halfway through. Why don't you all stop looking at me and go outside? Like just these kind of goofy kind of interplays with the band, with the members. Like, you paid $15 American. All this kind of stuff, like it's just so fucking hilarious. But these versions of these songs are definitely like some of the best. The I know you're fucking someone else. I can't remember the full giant title of the version that's on Slow, Deep, and Hard, but I do like the version on here a lot better. It goes off in different directions. It's got this weird kind of like baiting the audience, like croon in the middle. Is like, yeah, fuck you too. Like that kind of thing is so fucking great. The kind of like Kill You Tonight into Hey Pete, which is a play on like Hey Joe. Just so fucking good. So heavy. You know, this is definitely the introduction of that more doomy, like slow. Like if you listen to a lot of the stuff on Slow, Deep, and Hard, it definitely falls more into the carnivore kind of camp. You know, it's more epic, slower. Definitely more of that Sabbath doom element to it, but you know, it hasn't gotten into what you would get later with Bloody Kisses and October Rust, those kind of albums. So, but very cool. The side 4, I really like the long, slow cover of Black Sabbath's Paranoid. Totally like reinterprets that song. So yeah, very, very happy to have this. All of them come on this great marble green vinyl. Comes with a poster, but I already hung that up. Pretty thick quality to everything in the packaging. The sleeve is like real thick card stock. The poster was very well printed, so yeah, very happy to have this. I love this album, and you know, continue to work on getting the others. Maybe in order, maybe not in order. It'd be funny if I actually did get all of these in order. So next up, this was a recent reissue from Nuclear Blast. They've been really cranking out a lot of these. They recently started releasing all of the Dismember material, which I'm definitely got my eye on. I want to grab a bunch of those. Hopefully at the archive they get in a few of those as well. But this is another Swedish band that I was never really as into as I should have been. You know, I kind of overlook this. I always kind of thought they were more in that mellow death kind of lane, and I've heard some of their later stuff is, but this is definitely like a blind spot in a lot of my listening, and that is Hypocrisy with Abducted. I believe this is their third record. This is definitely going in a element of like alien abduction and all those kind of cool things. It's definitely got like a crazy vibe to this record. I haven't spent a lot of time with it, but dude, it's just the guitar playing on this is insane. You know, this kind of, it's got a bit of that prog, you know, kind of reminds you of Elements by Atheist, but it, you know, it's just very heavy. Just, I like it a lot. I just gotta spend more time with it. So maybe if I do a Swedish death metal kind of discussion, I'll get more into this. But yeah, Hypocrisy, happy to have it. Great freaking album, and I'm looking to get into more of their stuff. And last, this is, you know, top tier shit. I can't remember where this band's from. I'm thinking they're Swedish, but I probably am wrong. But as far as that kind of like spacey, prog, death metal, like tech death kind of stuff, this is definitely top tier shit. Nocturnus the Key. I believe it's from the 90s. I can't remember, but this is on Earache Records. It's on black vinyl. You got this nice insert. I do love this album. It's just great atmosphere through the whole thing. You know, that kind of space, alien, like, you know, kind of vibe to it. It's very fascinating. Just in that time period, man, everything was kind of like, you know, going in pretty weird directions. You got a very high amount of keyboards on here, but they work very well. It's just this epic kind of otherworldly quality to this record. Lake of Fire is such a great opener. Visions from Beyond the Grave, Droid Sector I like, kind of a lesser one on here, but I do enjoy it. Just such a cool kind of experience digging into this record. And you know, Earache puts out these like records, a lot of them I have, with this full dynamic range, and it does add a lot to the sound. Like, you can pick out more of the individual instruments and what they're doing on these releases. Very cool. Eventually gonna do an Earache video and talk about the classic Earache material, not so much, you know, the stuff that they're doing now, which I have no interest in. I don't know how much into a detail I'm gonna get, but Digby is not a very likable person if you dig into a lot of the accounts of bands that were on his label in the past. But, you know, you can't deny, you know, Altars of Madness and, you know, World Downfall by Terrorizer, the first couple of Carcass albums, you know, like all these iconic records, early Napalm Death, all this stuff coming out on Earache is just, they were kicking it out of the park the entire fucking time. Just insane fucking output, and it's a shame that they're not, you know, still that top tier label, but, you know, you're run by an asshole. It's, you know, bound to happen eventually, I guess. But yeah, thrilled to have this. Trying to get more classic Earache material on record, and yeah, so this is great to add to the collection. And yeah, so that should about do it. So yeah, if you have any thing to say about the movies or records that I have discussed, put them down there in the description, in the comments, in the description. I'll have the usual information that I include there. You know, a lot of interesting stuff coming out from Vinegar Syndrome and its partner labels this month, so definitely, if you haven't checked those out yet, definitely do that. I'm excited to see what October and definitely November have in store for releases. There's been a lot of great stuff coming out this year. A lot of stuff you would never think would get released. Like, just mind-blowing releases throughout this year. It's very cool. Yeah, like and subscribe if you have not done that yet. I don't know how much I'm going to be doing this week, and I kind of take it easy, but I got a few ideas. You know, I got a trip up to Hartford for CT Horror Fest coming up towards the end of the month, and probably going to do a video talking about what I am able to pick up there and the experience of being there, maybe show off some photos and all that kind of good stuff. We shall see. But the point is, there is more coming on the channel for sure. If you want to find me on social media, I am on Instagram as the Hordes of Manzerfaust, and that'll about do it. So this is Mike Manzer with another Manzerfaust Productions video. Stay fucking metal.